Hello, everybody. This is Bob Probst with the Probst Law Firm in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. It is Wednesday at 4 o'clock, and today is another version of our Wednesday at 4 live sessions. As I told you in the past, I'm going to try to do these live sessions every week on Wednesday at 4 o'clock, as long as my schedule permits. And I'll try to pick a subject to talk about that might be interesting to some folks. So if you're listening to this, if you have any questions, you can post them here. If you have any subjects you'd like me to cover in the future, feel free to post it here. Go on our Facebook page and post it later. Shoot me an email at bob@probstlawfirm.com. Today's session is going to talk about custody and divorce. You know, all divorces affect children, right? The statistics are that more than 50% of marriages end in divorce, and there's a large percentage of them that have children. And the message I want to get out to you today is, if nothing else, if you don't take away anything else from what I'm talking about today, please take away this. All divorces affect children. All divorces. Your divorce, if I'm divorced, your cousin's divorce, your sibling's divorce, all divorces affect children. That's a fact. Now, many of you who know me know that me and my family are big movie buffs, and we often quote movies in everyday conversation. And I'm about to drop a quote on you from a scene in one of my favorite movies right now to get my point across. One of my favorite movies of all time is My Cousin Vinny. In that movie, there's a scene where his fiancée, Mona Lisa Vito, is testifying in court. And the other attorney objects to what she's saying. And Judge Haller leans into her and he says, "Are you stating an opinion or a fact?" And she leans back at him and she looks at him and she says, "It's a fact." Well, I'm here to tell you now, it's a fact that all divorces will affect the children in the divorce. There have been a lot of studies made over the years that show that, and my 32 years of practice anecdotally tells me that happens. If you just think about your own friends and family members, you know it happens to some degree. It affects all of them. But the key is, you can control. If you're going through a divorce right now, or a family member is, and you're talking to them about it, and you're going through a custody battle, you can control how much it affects your children, you and your spouse. Now, unfortunately, sometimes one party is wanting to control the damage that's done to their children, and the other party just doesn't care, and that's problematic. But what I want to get across to you today is that you have the ability and the opportunity to control the damage that's done to your children as you go through a divorce. What a divorce deals with regard to custody, or what custody deals with in a divorce, is what's going to happen with the children, right? We all love our children. We all want them to be happy. We want them to be healthy. We want them to go to the best schools. We want to be able to provide the best food for them, the best housing for them. We want to be able to take them on nice vacations. Everything we do after we've had children seems like it's for the children, right? That's what we do as a parent. That's one of our jobs, is to help our children grow up to be the best adult they can be. And that's also your job even as you go through a divorce and as you go through custody. Because let's face it, it's not our children's fault when we're getting a divorce, right? Sometimes it's one party's fault. Sometimes it's both parties' faults. Sometimes it's neither party's fault, right? There are cases I've had where nobody's really done anything really bad. Nobody's really committed some terrible fault to the other. It's more they've just grown apart, right? As life goes on, as the years go past, some of us change. Our values change, our thoughts change, our desires change. And so sometimes it's nobody's fault. But it doesn't matter whether it's one party's fault, both parties' fault, or nobody's fault. It's still going to affect your children. And it's just a question of how much. Each of us can control how much damage is done to our children by the way we act during that, right? Think about it. Your children, we all have said this for many years, children are like sponges, right? They just absorb everything around them. They see things and they absorb it. They hear things and they absorb it. And quite frankly, they see body language. They just see it. They feel attention in the house. They absorb all that, the good and the bad. And when you're going through a divorce and when you're going through custody issues, they see and absorb that as well. So what can you do to make it better for them? Well, first of all, be an adult about it, right? Think about how it is you are interacting with your spouse and what they're seeing and hearing. Think about how you are interacting with them as a parent and what they're seeing and hearing you say to them. Remember that things often get said out of anger because we were surprised by something that came up, because we're having a bad day. And some of those things we should remember can't be taken back. Once it comes, the words are uttered out of your mouth, whether it's something you're saying about your spouse or something you're saying to your children, remember, sometimes those words can't be taken back. Sometimes the mental picture that your children get from those words or from those actions they see can't be erased. It's there. And now it's part of their being, and it's part of how they're going to have to adjust and move forward. So it's key that you do certain things as you're going through this. One, don't use your children as weapons, right? Don't make them be go-betweens. Don't make them carry messages. Don't let them hear you talk badly about their other parent. Don't let other people talk badly about your other parent, their other parent in front of them. Just be more responsible. Use some forethought with everything you do or say about how it might affect your children. Remember that this custody situation you're in and they're in is an adult situation. It's for the adults to decide what's best for the children. It's not for the children. They're just kids. Let them be kids. You two be the adults to bring yourselves, your spouse, and your children through this dilemma on this journey and come out on a better side, on the other side. So basically, there are two ways I always taught the clients that you can go through this. There's what I call the easier, cheaper way, or the harder, more expensive way, right? That's your two options as you go through this. And it's the things you ought to be thinking about when one, you're thinking about what kind of attorney do I want, or two, how do I want to be for myself as I go through this. And so here they are. The easier, cheaper way is that the two of you sit down, act like adults, talk like adults about one another. I know that there are hurts in the marriage that the two of you have suffered, either intentionally or not intentionally even. And I get that affects sometimes how you want to act towards your spouse or how your spouse wants to act towards you. But just remember that even though there are hurts, we're talking about what's best for your children here. You need to set aside your pride and how you feel and what you think is in your best interest and start thinking about what's in your children's best interest as things move forward. So the easier, cheaper way is you sit down, you talk as adults, you know your family dynamic, you know your job statuses, you know the hours that you work, you know what your children's like, they don't like. You know your spouse better than anyone else, the good and the bad. Your spouse knows you, the good and the bad, better than anyone else. So sit down and talk through, we're not going to be married anymore. We understand that. We're not going to be living together anymore. We understand that. But how can we help our children? What's best for them in this new world we're creating for ourselves? That's one way to do it. The second way to do it is to be a warrior and go to war with your spouse and to treat this division, this divorce, this separation like a war to be won, like a battle to beat them in, rather than like a new phase of life for the both of you that involves your children that you want to see done as best as possible, as successfully as possible. And that can affect, for example, what kind of lawyer you hire. If you're going to hire one to represent you, do you want that lawyer who understands the big picture and wants to help you navigate this very difficult time in your life, and come out on the other side better person, come out on the other side a better parent, come out on the other side taking into consideration your children and how you can still continue to be in their lives and help them be better people, better adults, better children? Or are you going to look more for a type of attorney, and there's plenty of them out there, who are just going to go to war? They're going to go to battle. They're going to scorch the earth. They're going to take whatever measure necessary to beat your spouse, to win the war, whatever that victory looks like. And so that's something for you to consider as you talk to attorneys. And it's something for you to consider as you decide for yourself how you want this to move forward. But so obviously, if you're able to agree on stuff, you're going to get it done quicker. You're going to get it done with less emotional distress for you and your spouse and your children. And you're going to get it done more inexpensively, cheaper. If you're going to battle over everything, if you're going to battle in court in front of judges, if you're going to want to just beat your spouse over the head, it's going to take longer, it's going to be more emotional, and it's going to be a lot more expensive. Sometimes you have no choice but to go to court. But I find that's rarely the only choice you have. If you sit down and you think, how do I go from point A, where I am now, to point B, where I want to be, there's oftentimes a way to do it that doesn't involve going to battle in scorched earth warfare. But if you do go to court, if you are going to have a hearing, let's talk about a few things that you should remember. First, you have to go in North Carolina to mediation before you can actually have it heard before a judge. So you file your action, you put in your pleadings why you think it's in your children's best interest for you to have custody. Generally speaking, that often means you're airing some dirty laundry in that pleading when you file it. Your spouse is going to respond, also airing some of your dirty laundry. But even before you can get to a hearing, you're going to have to go to mediation. It's required. And maybe you work it out there. If you do, great. The mediator is going to work up an agreement. You can sign it. The court will sign it. The case is done. If you're not able to resolve it at the mediation, then the mediator will let the court know he couldn't resolve it. He or she couldn't resolve it with you, and you can move forward to a hearing. Once you get to that hearing, the standard for the court to decide who the children are going to live with and how involved both parents are going to be with the children, the standard for that is the best interest of the children. Let me repeat that. The best interest of the children. Notice I didn't say your best interest. Notice I didn't say your spouse's best interest. Notice I didn't say what you want. Notice I didn't say what your spouse wants. It's not anything about that. It's what's in the best interest of the children. That's the standard that the judge is going to have to use in making any decisions. The next thing to think about, I think, before you decide that's the way you want to go is this, and I tell this to most of my clients. In this case that you're involved, right? I've already said you know your family, you know your family dynamics, you know your children, you know how they react to things, you know your spouse better than anyone else, you know probably what is in the best interest of your children better than anyone else. But if you decide to go to court, you're going to let a judge decide. The person who's going to know the least about your case is the judge, right? You know the most, you and your spouse. By the time you're done having all your meetings and prep work with your lawyer, they're going to know the next most about you and the dynamics and your family and your kids. The person who's going to know the least is the person you're going to let make the decision, and that's a judge. Sometimes these hearings take just a couple hours. Sometimes they take a couple of days. So you got a lifetime of your children's past and your children's future being decided by someone who may have only heard evidence for a couple of hours. And so I ask my clients, and I would tell you to do the same thing, think about that. Is that the best way to figure out how to navigate the future for your children? Is that the best person to make that decision? Because believe this, the judge will make a decision if you can. They will decide from that day forward how much time you get to spend with your children. They will decide from that day forward how much time your spouse gets to spend with the children. They will decide from that day forward who your children are going to live with, what visitation a parent is going to get, how much involvement grandparents might have. They will decide that for you, and I just always ask, is that really who you want to make that decision? Another thing to consider when you're going to trial is that you're going to have to testify, and your spouse is going to have to testify. And you're probably going to have to say some not so nice things about them in order to show the court why it's in your children's best interest again for you to have custody. You're going to air some dirty laundry, and your spouse is going to air some dirty laundry. And you're going to say things, and your spouse is going to say things, and your lawyers are going to say things that can't be taken back. Once they're said, they can't be taken back. They can't be erased. Once you say some of those hurtful things, once your spouse says some, it's going to affect your relationship with your spouse. Sometimes those things can never be taken back, and your spouse can't forget them, right? The next thing to think about is the judge may hear from other witnesses. You could be bringing in family members, teachers, talk about how well their children are doing in school, who's the parent that's most involved with the children in school. So it could be parents, teachers, neighbors. So now you've got these other people who are coming in, and they're hearing the dirty laundry that's being aired. They're having to come in and get in the middle of your drama. So again, I ask, is that the best way to handle it? Is that what you really want to do? Oftentimes, and most likely, the judge will not want to hear from your kids. That's going to depend on the issues you're trying to have your kids testify about, the age of your children, and the maturity of your children. But in most cases, a judge can look at it and go, I don't want to hear what the children have to say because it's not their decision. It was originally your decision, yours and your spouse's. But because you come to trial, you've given me that decision now. And I don't want children being involved what should be an adult situation. I don't want children being involved in giving adult testimony. That's not their role. They're just kids. So there are times when they will hear your children. I've seen judges not do it on the bench, but instead will have private meetings with your children in their offices where it's a little less stressful for them. And I've had judges just say, I'm not going to hear from the children. I'll hear from the adults and I'll make my decision from that. So I have a lot of clients sometimes will say, well, I want my child to get up there and say what she's been doing. Chances are that's not going to happen. And so you should know that, and you should take that into consideration. Because again, is that even really what you want? Is that the position you want to put your children in? To be in the middle of the drama and the fight between you and your spouse? As I said earlier, you've made a decision that you're not going to stay married for whatever reason, whatever things have gone on in your marriage, you can't be married again. But do you need your children to be involved in that drama any more than they already have just by watching whatever it is you and your spouse have been going through? The other thing I try to tell folks is no matter what happens when you go to trial, no matter who wins, no matter who loses, you are going to have to deal with your spouse probably for the rest of your life. And you're going to have to deal with your spouse probably for the rest of your life because you have children with them, right? Children are underage now, so you really got to deal with your spouse. But even when they turn 18, go to college, get married, have children of their own, there's still going to be family gatherings, family holidays. You're still going to be involved probably with your spouse. But you're most certainly going to be involved with your spouse till at least your youngest child turns 18. You're going to have to make decisions. You're going to see them at the sports fields if they're playing sports. You're going to see them at the ballet if they're doing dancing. You're going to see them at the parent-teacher conferences. You may see them at family gatherings, right? So there is going to be a future involving you and your spouse and your children. So you want to set that future on a course where you handle things maturely. You and your spouse, both of you, handle things maturely and move forward in a way that you felt and you hoped and you prayed that would be least ill effect to your children, right? Isn't that the way you want to do it? So I just urge people to remind you, no matter who wins or loses, you're going to have that relationship. So here's some I thought of three things you should do when you're going through a custody situation. Three things you should do. First, number one thing, I think, after 30 years of practice, remain civil with your spouse, particularly in front of your children, right? Don't use your children as weapons. Don't talk ill of your spouse in front of your children. In other words, don't say, I could do that, but your mom, blah, 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 blah. Or I could do that, but your dad, blah, 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 blah. Don't use them as messengers, right? Don't send them, go tell your dad when you see him this weekend, X. Or go tell your mom Y. What goes on in those situations are for the adults, not for the children. So the number one thing I think you can do is remain civil with your spouse so your kids don't see you calling them names, so their kids don't see you talking dirty, mean, and nasty about them, so your kids don't see you arguing with them. Remember, they're a sponge. They absorb it all. They see things, they hear things, they feel tension, and those things affect them and may affect the adult they become. And don't say things in front of their children or to your children that can never be taken back. I've had so many clients who later would tell me that they regret having said or done something because their kids brought it up years later. So be mindful of that as you're going through this process. The second thing, very important thing as well, think about what's in the best interest of the children, your children, the people you and your spouse brought into this world, right? Think back to all those things you wanted to be able to provide to them. Think back to all those great things you wanted them to have. Think about all the things you wanted to do to help them become some really great adults, happy, moral, honest adults with integrity. And remember that That's what you have to keep in mind. Not what's best for me or you, not what's best for your spouse, what's in the best interest of your children. And be honest with yourself about that. Be honest with yourself. Have that tough conversation with yourself. It's your chance to get this situation right for your children. And the third thing is going back to what I said before. You and your spouse are going to have a relationship for the rest of your lives, and at least until the children are 18, but probably for the rest of your lives. So remember those three things as you go through it. Be civil in front of your spouse. Be honest about what's in the best interest of your children. And remember, you're going to have a continued relationship with your spouse. When you're going through a divorce that involves custody, you're moving on to a next chapter in your life. It just is. Whether you wanted it or whether you didn't want it, it's a fact. Again, my cousin Vinny and Mona Lisa Vito, it is a fact that you're going to have a new life, right? That you're having a new beginning. It's a fact that your spouse is also going to have a different life, a new life. And it's a fact that your children's lives are going to change. And there's going to be a new reality for them, right? Recognize that and truly own it as a parent who loves your children. Own it as an adult and use that knowledge and that feeling and that love you have for your children to do it the right way if you can. There are going to be ups and downs and bumps all along that route, all along that journey until it's done. And then even in the future, as you and your spouse now try to co-parent from two separate households. But just remember those things we talked about. Own it. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with your kids. Be honest with your spouse or ex-spouse at that time. Only you and your spouse can help your kids get through this with as little damage as possible. Your choice. You can go all out, all battle, all war, scorched earth, or you can be mature, responsible, adult, and try to resolve as many of the issues as you can in a way that is causes the least damage to your children. I have done cases. I have won custody for cases. I've been practicing long enough. I've won custody for cases now. And then that child I got custody for somebody is now an adult and has children. And I've done custody cases for them. So, so I've seen them years later. And many of them will tell me I was right about the way you could do it and the way you are doing it. Your choice. You get to make that decision as an adult. Your spouse gets to make that decision as an adult. Your children just have to live with it. Anyway, that's my thoughts on custody during a divorce. If you've got questions about that, you can reach out to us at my website, probstlawfirm.com. You can call us at 336-721-9090. You can email me at bob@probstlawfirm.com. You can post something on our Facebook page, and I'm happy to try to reach out to you and answer. Again, thanks for listening today. I hope you were able to get something out of it. With everything going on in the world out there, I say everybody be safe and peace. Thanks.